On Christmas Day 2024, something terrible happened in the sky over Kazakhstan. It was a day meant for celebration, but it turned into a nightmare for many families. The serene skies were suddenly filled with chaos and tragedy. Azerbaijan Airlines Flight J28243, flying from Baku to Grozny, crashed. The flight, which was supposed to be a routine journey, ended in disaster. The plane, carrying passengers from different walks of life, never reached its destination. The crash, near the city of Aktau, killed 38 people. The wreckage was scattered over a wide area, making the rescue efforts even more challenging. Families were left devastated, and the world mourned the loss of innocent lives. 29 people survived, but they saw something awful. The survivors, though grateful to be alive, were haunted by the memories of the crash. They witnessed the horror firsthand and were left with scars that would last a lifetime. The world was sad, but soon people started asking questions. News of the crash spread quickly, and soon, it was the topic of discussion everywhere. People wanted to know how such a tragedy could happen. Could this crash have been stopped? Investigators began their work, sifting through the wreckage and examining every detail. They were determined to find out what went wrong and if it could have been prevented. Evidence suggests a scary possibility: a Russian missile hit the plane. This revelation sent shockwaves around the world. The idea that a missile could bring down a commercial flight was terrifying. This wasn't just an accident. The evidence pointed to something much more sinister. It suggested that the crash was not a mere accident, but a result of a deliberate act. This might have been caused by a mistake, by a war hurting innocent people. The region was already tense with conflict, and this tragedy highlighted the dangers of war spilling over into civilian life. The flight, with people from many countries, got caught in a war that wasn't theirs. Now, everyone wants answers. The passengers were from various nations, and their families demanded to know why their loved ones had to suffer. Was this a terrible accident or something that could have been avoided? The investigation continued, with experts from around the world joining forces to uncover the truth. They wanted to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The evidence, what people saw, and the investigation will help us understand what happened. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, the world watched and waited for answers. The hope was that the findings would bring some closure to the grieving families and prevent future tragedies. Flight J28243 started like any other flight. It left Baku, Azerbaijan on Christmas morning. People were going on holiday trips or visiting family. They were going to Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. The beginning of the trip was normal, but as the plane got close to Grozny, thick fog covered the airport. The pilots couldn't see to land safely. They tried 2 times, but they had to go back up. They were running out of fuel, so they decided to go to Aktau, Kazakhstan, instead. It was during this change of plans while flying over the Caspian Sea that the terrible thing happened. Passengers heard a loud boom, then the scary sound of metal ripping. The plane was badly damaged and falling fast. The fog wasn't the only problem that Christmas Day. Hours before Flight J28243 arrived, things were already tense in Grozny. The city was under attack, but not by soldiers. Ukrainian drones, which had been common in the skies above Chechnya, were attacking military buildings in and around the city. Russia fought back hard, using its strong air defense systems. They used the Pantsir S, a missile system that can be moved quickly and used to shoot down drones. This decision, made during the fighting, would have terrible results. As Flight J28243 flew into this dangerous situation, everything was in place for a tragedy. The evidence that a missile hit the plane is scary. People on the ground near the crash saw a bright light in the sky, then a big boom just before the plane fell. People who survived, many hurt by flying metal pieces, told scary stories about what happened. They said there was a sudden, strong hit, and the plane filled with smoke and broken pieces. Also, early investigations found pieces of metal, not from the plane, in the wreckage. These pieces look like parts of a Russian missile, and this has shocked people around the world. The evidence, while still being investigated, suggests something terrible. Right after the crash, Russia denied any responsibility and gave very careful, measured statements. They were quick to address the media, but their words were chosen with extreme caution. The spokesperson emphasized that it was too early to draw any conclusions, and that a thorough investigation would be conducted. This initial denial set the tone for the days to come. They expressed sorrow over the loss of lives, offering condolences to the families of the victims. However, they stopped short of admitting any fault or responsibility. The officials maintained a somber demeanor, but their words lacked the accountability that many were seeking. This left a gap between their expressions of sympathy and the public's demand for answers. President Putin, in a televised address, conveyed his deep sorrow to the families of the victims. He appeared solemn and sincere, acknowledging the tragedy's impact on the nation. His speech was carefully crafted to show empathy and concern, but it also aimed to deflect blame. He assured the public that the government would do everything in its power to support the affected families. Putin attributed the crash to a series of unfortunate events, including the thick fog that enveloped the area and the implementation of the Carpet Plan, a safety protocol designed to prevent civilian flights during hazardous conditions. He emphasized that these factors were beyond human control, framing the incident as a tragic accident rather than a failure of the system. Despite these explanations, inconsistencies in the official narrative began to surface. People started to question the validity of the statements made by the government. Journalists and analysts dissected the information, pointing out discrepancies and raising doubts about the true cause of the crash. The public's skepticism grew as more details emerged. One major point of contention was the decision not to allow Flight J28243 to make an emergency landing at a nearby Russian airport. Despite the apparent emergency, the flight was denied permission, which only fueled suspicions. This decision seemed inexplicable to many, leading to further distrust in the official account of events. Additionally, Russia's insistence on controlling the investigation raised eyebrows. While they expressed a willingness to cooperate, they restricted access to the crash site for international investigators. This lack of transparency was seen as an attempt to control the narrative and possibly hide critical evidence. The international community's calls for an independent investigation grew louder. As a result, public trust in the Russian government's handling of the situation eroded further. Protests and demonstrations erupted, with people demanding accountability and transparency. The government's actions or lack thereof only deepened the public's mistrust, creating a significant divide between the authorities and the citizens they were supposed to serve. The world reacted to the crash with anger and demands for justice. Leaders around the world said the crash was terrible and demanded a full investigation. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev, looking very upset, spoke to his country. He called the crash a barbaric act. He promised to find the people responsible and punish them. Ukraine, fighting with Russia, said Russia didn't care about civilian lives. President Zelensky asked other countries to punish Russia more, saying the world can't stay silent. The United States, while not directly blaming Russia, said they were very worried. They asked for a real and independent investigation and promised to help find the truth. Experts on airplanes looked at the evidence, and what they found is very worrying. The initial examination of the wreckage revealed patterns of damage that are not consistent with a typical crash. Instead, they point towards an external force, something powerful enough to bring down a commercial airliner in mid-flight. It makes it seem even more likely that a missile hit the plane. The debris field was scattered over a wide area, which is a common characteristic of an aircraft that has been struck by a missile. The investigators noted the presence of shrapnel-like holes in the fuselage, which further supports the missile strike theory. The damage to the plane, especially the tail, looks like it was caused by a powerful exploding warhead, something found in missiles. The tail section showed signs of high-velocity impacts, and the pattern of the damage was consistent with the detonation of a warhead designed to maximize destruction. Also, reports say the pilots had problems with their electronics just before the crash. The sudden loss of communication and control systems is indicative of an external electronic interference, which is often a precursor to a missile strike. This suggests that someone used jamming technology, which is often used with missile systems. The jamming of radar and communication systems would have left the pilots helpless, unable to respond or take evasive action. Experts also noticed that the black boxes, which record what happens on a flight, look like they were messed with. The data from the flight recorders showed anomalies that could not be explained by a simple mechanical failure. It appeared that someone had tampered with the recordings to obscure the true cause of the crash. They think this might be a cover-up. The inconsistencies in the data and the physical evidence suggest that there was an attempt to hide the involvement of a missile. The investigators are now looking into who might have had the capability and motive to carry out such an attack. All of this, along with the physical evidence, makes it seem more likely that a missile hit the plane, making Russia's claims of innocence look doubtful. The international community is now calling for a thorough and transparent investigation to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable. The investigation into the crash of Flight J28243 is continuing. It's complicated and difficult. Investigators from around the world, including people from Azerbaijan, Ukraine, and the International Civil Aviation Organization, are at the crash site. But Russia is controlling the investigation and limiting what they can do. The black boxes, very important evidence, were sent to Moscow to be looked at. Some people don't like this. The investigation is also happening during a time of political tension between countries. The fighting between Russia and Ukraine has created mistrust. It's very important that the investigation is thorough and fair. The world needs to know what happened to Flight J28243. The families of the victims deserve justice. Sadly, this isn't the first time a civilian plane has been shot down during a war. Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 crashed over Ukraine in 2014, also possibly because of a Russian missile. This reminds us of the terrible cost of these events. These sad events show us that we need better ways to protect civilian planes flying near war zones. Countries need to work together to stop this from happening again. This means making clear rules for military actions near where civilian planes fly, making air traffic control better in war zones, and punishing those who shoot down civilian planes. We must remember the people who died on Flight J28243 and all victims of these tragedies, and learn from this.